And now, it's that time of the week once again. Welcome to the Departure Lounge podcast with your host, Tom Whittle, your ticket to the home of aviation podcasts. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight.
Good evening. Finally. I don't know what happened. Don't ask me. It just wasn't connecting with the streaming platform. So hence the sort of the massive delay. I tried to fix it, and so I thought, well, I'll create another one. Anyway, good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 81 of the Departure Lounge podcast here on the Departure Lounge YouTube channel. Hope you are all doing well. I am running solo this week, so I am the only person on the show. So please be nice to me. Please be nice to me. Yes, I hope you are well this evening. I am very tired. I've driven back from London today and been non-stop ever since. So yes, again, please bear with me. So let me know in the chat, of course, where you are watching from and, of course, how you are as well. And we'll get into tonight's show very shortly. But let's have a look and see, excuse me, who is in the chat. So we have Serena Riley, one of our mods, saying, well done, Tom. Yeah, thank you very much for getting the stream back on the show. Yeah, thank you very much. We also have MaxJet TV, see him there. Jack Rolls is there. Same with Taylor Ackroyd is there. Jim Gemmell is there. And Michael Painter as well. So hello to you. So we're only going to be on for about an hour or so, just purely because of the fact I am, of course, running solo this evening. Yes, let's go into the housekeeping for this evening. So we are on social media, as you should know by now. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and of course Twitter as well. So if you wish to give us a follow on those, you can do to keep up to date with everything that is happening on the podcast, of course, as well as everything else in terms of pictures, videos, etc. We also have a shop which you can buy the merch from down below in the description. It would help the channel out massively and, of course, show support for the channel. So if you can do that, that would be wonderful. Also, we have a Facebook community group where you can join and share stories, photos, videos, etc., with a wonderful community of people that have already joined. So if that's something that you fancy doing, do consider finding us. We are called the Departure Lounge community channel. So do consider joining that one. And of course, if you wish to become a guest on the show as we build up to episode 100, do get in touch with us on any of the social medias. And of course, we will get you on the show as soon as we can. Got a very busy couple of weeks, I would say, in terms of shows, including a potential pre-recorded one, which is to come, but I won't spoil any of that just yet. So tonight we are here to talk about, as I've mentioned on all the social medias that I've posted the show on, one of Canada's greatest what-ifs is, of course, the Avro CF105 Arrow, or just simply known as the Avro Arrow. I'm supposed to have Jack here with me to talk about it, but Jack's laptop or just any technology that Jack touches seems to go down the pan, so hence why I'm running solo on this one. But yes, so we're talking about the Avro Arrow. Now, anybody that might not have heard it or might not know what it is quite a revolutionary bit of kit. I'll bring a picture up now for you all to see. The Avro Arrow, virtually sort of a really, really high-tech Canadian-built aircraft, which was really ahead of its time. Yeah, the way that it went out of production was quite sad, really. So we're going to go into more detail about that as the night goes on. Of course, if anybody of you have heard about the Avro Arrow, do get any opinions or facts or anything else that you like into the chat, and we'll get them read out as the evening goes on. So, facts off the top of my head: this flew quicker than Concorde. This was out before Concorde. I think it was the designs were 1953 onwards to the rollout in about 1957. The first flight, 25th of March 1958, and then of course the cancellation of the entire program, which was on the 20th of February 1959. Lots of comparisons can be made to this particular aircraft. Of course, sort of one of the first revolutionary delta wing fighter jets, and of course the main purpose of this aircraft being built was purely to scathe off any threats from the then Soviet Union, of course, who just introduced their Tupolev Tu-95 nuclear bombers. And of course, these aircraft were there. These aircraft were here to potentially go and intercept the aircraft that were coming in to potentially launch any attacks against America or even Canada. So, off the bat, first impressions, I want to know, those in the chat, I'd like to know what you seem to think about this particular aircraft. I do have more pictures as the evening goes on, so do, like I said, do get opinions in if you like it. If you don't like it, or what you may think it's very, very similar to. Michael Painter, a good year, 1958. I'm imagining that's probably a birth year for for somebody. Yeah, it's an interesting, very, very interesting plane, and it's got one of massive, massive history as well. Off the record, for my personal opinion, I think it looks absolutely stunning. I think it's before we go into the mass detail, I think it looks absolutely phenomenal. I think it's a really nice looking fighter jet, and one that can sort of fit into any sort of modern day sort of fighter fleet, especially around the likes of the Typhoon and the modern day jets that were coming out. Of course, the aircraft was very, very high tech for its time. Many people, or many critics, putting it down as sort of the most high tech aircraft of its generation, which we'll sort of go into a little bit more. But we'll go for the background. We'll go for the background first. I'll just go through some of the notes that I've written down here through the extensive research I've done on this particular aircraft. So, as I said, the main purpose of this particular plane was, of course, to stave off any Soviet Union threat. Of course, around this time, post sort of Second World War, they tried to, or they began developing a fleet of long-range bombers. Of course, hence the Tupolev Tu-95, which could be which was capable of delivering nuclear weapons across North America and, of course, of Europe as well. The main threat was sort of from high-speed, high-altitude bombing runs launched from the Soviet Union at the time, traveling across the Arctic against military bases and built-up industrial centers in, of course, Canada and the US. Hence why they had to try to find a way of countering this threat. Western countries, of course, developed interceptors that could engage and destroy these bombers before they reached their targets. So quite sort of interesting how you think about the aircraft nowadays, and how they're sort of what they're in service for, essentially, and think about how we, nowadays strategically throw planes out there to, scave off any sort of warnings from, Soviet Union or Russia or anything else like that, or quick response, sort of aircraft. Now we're finding out that it was something that they were doing way back, just to kind of help themselves when it came to the threat of potential bombings, which was 70 years ago at least. This aircraft was designed. A little bit more about the aircraft. So the aircraft, of course, built by the Avro Canada Limited Company, of course known as Avro, and of course they aren't any strangers to building fighter planes. Of course, they built the Avro CF-100 Canuck, which was an all-weather interceptor. This was sort of from around 1945 onwards. They've been set up, Avro Canada has been set up as a subsidiary to Hawker Siddeley, another popular name with those that are fans of possibly the Harrier, I think. And of course, they their main sort of base was at Moulton, Ontario, which is today known as Toronto Pearson, the main sort of airport into Canada, or one of them into Canada. And the CF-100 Canuck underwent a lengthy and troubled prototype stage for entering service 7 years later in 1953. So it wasn't quite up to scratch with what most countries were looking for in terms of looking for an interceptor, which is why, of course, that then led to Avro going down the route of potentially building and entering into service the Avro Arrow. They conducted high-speed tests, and they wanted to make sure that supersonic flight was possible for this particular fighter jet. And one of the most crucial and surprising was the sudden onset of a new form of drag known as wave drag. The effects of wave drag were so strong that the engines of the area couldn't provide enough power to overcome it, leading to the concept of a sound barrier. German research allowed, this is during the Second World War, had shown signs of wave drag and how to kind of greatly reduce it using airfoils that varied in the curvature as gradually as possible. Of course, at the same time, it was revolutionary because of the swept wing design. Of course, most fighter jets back then were used as like a typical kind of tail, horizontal stabilizers, and of course the fuselage with with the wings coming out of it. However, of course, the revolutionary design, if I bring it back up onto the screen there, I'll do this one here. Of course, you can see the swept wing with the engines pointed towards the back, which is quite an interesting sort of concept for the time. And there was a lot of positive talk about it. I know a lot of Canada were really excited about the opportunity to have a new fighter jet, especially this one that was well ahead of its time, come out into the Canadian service. And it also made people feel very safe if there was any sort of onslaught of potential Soviet Union attack. So because they had designed the Avro Arrow to be a high-speed supersonic aircraft, of course, they had to bring the design of the Delta Wing into the aircraft. The Delta Wing had many of the same advantages, of course, of a swept wing in terms of transonic and supersonic performance, but offered much more internal room and overall surface area, which, of course, provides more room for fuel, which, of course, was quite an important deal if you could sort of get more for your money, sort of thing. Considering the inefficient jet engines of the time, of course, having more fuel on board allowed it to kind of have a bit more range on it than most fighter jets. Of course, the disadvantages, and of course, this is all just it's all described on documentaries to do with Concorde, of course. The disadvantages of having the delta wing, of course, was the increased drag at lower speeds, and of course at lower altitudes, especially higher drag while maneuvering. For the interceptor role, these were minor concerns, but the aircraft will be spending most of its time flying in straight lines at high altitude and speeds, so mitigating those disadvantages. So cancelling out any sort of negativity that may have come from having delta wing with the drag and everything else at low speeds, because most of the time they'd be spending the majority of the flight going at full speed. The maximum speed, for those wondering, is of course it could reach nearly Mach 2, potentially Mach 2 or Mach 2 plus, which the sort of maximum speed on that would be 1,307 miles per hour, 1,307, at a height of 50,000 feet, and its cruising speed was 606 miles an hour at 36,000 feet. So quite a very quick aircraft, very, very quick aircraft. I do like the shape of it. I think this one, considering with the amount of technology that's gone into it, I think it's a massive, definitely a massive kind of nod to the aircraft of nowadays. Typhoons and stuff will all have got their inspiration, no doubt, from the Avro Arrow, of course. But of course, we're here talking about the plane, and of course, we're talking about the sad story behind why it never came to tuition. So, the interesting sort of idea behind the aircraft was one, obviously, to protect them from the skies, of course. The first sort of jet fighter sort of planes that the Soviet Union had, when of course the Arrow was due to be intercepting, of course, was the Soviet My-Shishchev M4 Bison jet bombers, and this, of course, was then followed on by the Soviet Union bringing in the Tupolev 95 Bears into service, which, of course, was then the main target for the Avro Arrow to go and intercept. The first rollout, like I said, October 1957, and the event was so anticipated across most of North America that 13,000 guests were invited to go along for the indication. Were invited for the rollout of the Avro Arrow, but unfortunately for Avro, the media and public attention for the Arrow rollout was dwarfed by the launch of Sputnik, which of course is the artificial Earth satellite launched by the Soviet Union. So it was launched on the same day as the rollout for the Avro, which then obviously didn't get as much attention as they would have hoped. Going back to after the rollout, the engine that the Avro Arrow used was the J75 engine, which was slightly heavier than the Orenda PS13 engine, which was initially designed as an advanced turbojet engine. And the first flight of the aircraft registered Romeo Lima 204 was conducted, like we said, on the 25th of March 1958 with Chief Development Test Pilot Janusz Żurowski at the controls. So we go from there to sort of the political side, unfortunately, to kind of understand why the Avro Arrow never came into service. And this was all down to some of the chief and senior military officials of the Canadian Air Force beginning to question the actual program itself. according to many sort of news sources I've read, chiefs of staff of the Army and so both the Navy and the Army were both strongly opposed to the Arrow, since substantial funds were being diverted to the Air Force. So so the Navy and the Army weren't exactly happy with the fact that they were getting something very high tech, as opposed to the Air Force, which are being given this sort of brand new toy to play with, which, take it as you will, it's all down to whether you think it's a preference and things like that. But yeah, that caused a little bit of uproar, whilst the Air Marshal Hugh Campbell, the Royal Canadian Air Force Chief of Staff, backed it right up until its cancellation. So fully giving it its support, given the role that it was obviously going to be conducting. In June 1957, of course, a federal election in Canada, the governing Liberals lost the election to progressive Conservative government under Jonathan Diefenbaker. And the aircraft prospects then began to noticeably change in terms of its fortune. I'm going through my notes here. Forgive me. I've said that. Yes. So the aircraft was then, because of all the political uproar and we're not getting a new toy, but you are, etc. August 1958, the request of the cancellation of the Arrow happened. Meaning that obviously that then took the interest and the potential kind of upgraded safety that was being given to them by the Arrow was then taken away from them completely, due to the fact that they just didn't see a substantial need to have this aircraft, which was nuts at the time. But we look back on it now and you think to yourself, maybe like what would have been. But unfortunately now it's a case of quite literally it is a what if. It's a complete what if, and I'll get on to a little bit more as we go a little bit more into the detail of it. So once it was requested to be cancelled, the Cabinet Defence Committee actually refused it, as they were backing it for so long. And then a month later, it was then tabled again to say, we don't want this plane to go ahead, and recommended installation of the Bomark missile system. And of course, that was then accepted. But the installation of the missile system was accepted, but the refusal of the cancellation of the Arrow program was again thrown into it. So, they're backing it the entire way. And it's good, at that time, it was good to see, a good, proper public backing from the Cabinet Defence Committee, until the committee themselves waited until March 1959 to give a massive review of the whole thing. And then, of course, the whole cancellation happened on February 1959, 20th of February, and the day became known as Black Friday in the Canadian aviation history. Diefenbaker claimed that the decision was based on a thorough examination of threats and defense measures and the cost of defensive systems. More specifically, of course, onto that, apparently the cost would have needed to be over hundreds of manufacturer models in order for it to kind of, in order for it to kind of almost like pay for itself, sort of thing. And it's not ideal at that point. So yeah, it's not particularly brilliant. And of course, the decision to cancel the Arrow left an enormous amount of people out of jobs, and an enormous amount of people. So nearly 15,000 Avro employees, as well as another 15,000 of other employees in the supply chain, all lost their jobs due to the cancellation of the Avro Arrow. So I want to kind of know what you guys think about the cancellation of the program and what I've been sort of mentioning so far in terms of the Avro Arrow, and whether you sort of think at the moment whether it was the right idea to do, or in terms of finances and things like that, or whether you think that actually maybe it should have gone ahead and things like that. So I kind of want to know what you guys think in the chat. As I'll dive a little bit more into it. I mean, what we're into now, about half an hour or so. We may sort of run a little bit early as well. We may bring this show to an end very, very quickly. We'll see how we go. But yeah, let me know what you think of the Avro Arrow so far. So because of the mass amount of people, apparently lots of reports saying that declassified records show that Avro management was caught unprepared for the suddenness of the announcement by the government to cancel the Avro Arrow program, whilst executives were made aware of the fact that the program was in jeopardy. But an attempt to complete one of the Arrow, or some of the Arrows, to be given to the National Research Council of Canada as high-speed test aircraft refused. It was completely refused, and the Avro Arrow was then pretty much nothing after that. And no matter what they tried to do in order to try and find a way of bringing it back and proving that it was going to be well worth having in the fleets and stuff, it was not, wasn't possible in the end, which is quite sad. So basically, how I see it when I looked at it and I did my research and stuff, it was almost like Canada turning its back on something so revolutionary. I mean, that's like pretty much, that's like Britain turning its back on Concorde, or both Britain and France turning its back on Concorde, or something along the lines of that scale, sort of thing. Jack Rolls saying, could you imagine that zipping around the Riyadh skies if they did go through with it? Be amazing. Yeah, it'd be amazing to see. Whether the one will be flying around nowadays or not, I'm not entirely sure. I probably wouldn't think so, but it probably would have done some airshow circuits, no doubt. And it would have been really, really nice. I don't think it did too many flights either. Before the cancellation, I think it was maybe one or two. But yeah, it is quite sad. Clive Everly saying that sleek and very advanced for its time. Governments of that era seem to cancel a lot of these technical wonders before they get anywhere. Probably due to the fact that, with all this technology that was all coming to hand, that it may not have been suitable enough for it to actually be very sustainable going forward. A lot of these governments around that time were finding out about these. It's like people laughing about jet flight. It's not possible. And nowadays, every other plane is literally a jet powered aircraft. Or it's got a jet engine sort of thing. So I think that's more of a naivety side to it. I think with the amount of technology that was thrown into the Arrow to make it as super efficient and super high tech in order to be able to kind of outwit and outfight pretty much any other aircraft that had been built around that time. I think it was a case of literally pointing and going, "Oh, that won't work. It won't work." And actually, had they given it a chance, it probably would have done. So yeah, so that's pretty much what happened. Following the cancellation, 2 months after, literally 2 months after the project was cancelled, all aircraft engines, production tooling, and technical data were all scrapped and destroyed. The reason officially that was given for the destruction order was to destroy classified and secret materials used in the Arrow program, and the action had been attributed to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, of fears that a Soviet mole had infiltrated Avro, later confirmed to some degree by Mitrokhin archives. So yeah, so it's an interesting interesting story. Literally 2 months, and you're literally told we need to destroy everything, like destroy all the evidence of any arrow being made, which is why you don't see any in museums. And if you do see them in museums, they are purely replicas. They're not anything else. They are literally purely replicas of what should have been. It's not a real plane. It's all built as like a full-size model replica, and it's a shame. It's a massive shame, at least for me. Everything was destroyed. Blueprints, everything gone. You know, it is really it's really sad. It is really sad. Of course, that doesn't just end there. Of course, there were rumors that circulated that Air Marshal Wilfred Curtis, a World War One ace who headed Avro, had ignored Diefenbacher's request to have everything destroyed, and spirited one of the Avros away to be saved for posterity, to kind of preserve it, and who knows what the future could hold. The rumors of this supposedly happening were given life in an interview in 1968, when Curtis was asked directly if the rumor was true, to which he responded, "I don't want to answer that." He then proceeded to question the wisdom of printing the story of a missing arrow, and wondered whether it would be safe to reveal the existence of a surviving airframe only 9 years later. So even then, years after cancelling the program, it was still so secretive, and so sort of like, it's like robbing a bank. Robbing a bank and trying to kind of stop other people from from trying to steal potential ideas that have come from the Arrow, and it was something that was almost like a manhunt, especially like a manhunt, in order to make sure that nobody was getting their eyes on what the Arrow could have been, in case they end up producing it themselves. It's a weird story, even like years after the cancellation. Just gonna, I mean, there was some options to potentially bring it back, I think, as well. Just trying to So, I mean, as there have been various attempts over the years to potentially try and bring it back, and to potentially rebuild, and put into production the Avro Arrow years later again. I mean, it's like I say, it's that high tech, and it's that kind of aircraft that again would fit into any modern day fleet of any potential air force or anything else like that. And there have been lots of rumors about it potentially coming back anyway, and being built nowadays to go into service. And it's like I say, I mean, name me an aircraft off the top of your head where it's been cancelled and then they've spoken about actually building it later on in life. Because I can't think of one on the top of my head apart from the Arrow, where it's so highly sought after and everybody wants to see it and everyone wants to have it built, and it's so high tech and it would do the job well, but they just would not give it a chance, which is a massive shame. There are, of course, other sort of designs potentially for the Arrow. There was the Mark 1 version, which was the initial version, powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney J75 turbojet engines. Mark 2 version, which was to be fitted with the subsequent Orenda PS13 engines, and would be evaluated by Royal Canadian Air Force acceptance pilots, as well as Avro test pilots, and they would of course produce more power than the J75 engines. So apparently, as well, at the time of the cancellation of the entire program, the first Mark II Arrow, which was registered Romeo Lima 206, was apparently ready for taxi trials. And Avro expected it to break the world speed record, but it never ever flew, which is a shame, because it would have probably changed a little bit of the history as we sort of know, nowadays, sort of thing. Again, like I said at the beginning and at the top of the show, it is one of those massive what if moments. Like, what if they went ahead with it? What if it broke the world speed record? What if it did this? Like, how would technology change nowadays in terms of aircraft and things like that? It's it's one to think about. It got me thinking when I sort of suggested about doing it, and it was crazy, crazy that they even cancelled it and things like that. Figure wise, the aircraft, when they were doing the production and the building, apparently for the money at that time in the 50s, swallowed around $250 million, which in today's money is about 2.2 billion, and looked likely to swallow much more. So they were pumping so much money into it, and it just looked like it was going to eat more and more and more and more. And it was. It's definitely a shame that they ended up cancelling it because of course mostly the financial side of it, as well, of course, as the political side as well. As I said, the other sort of variant, there was a potential mention of a Arrow that could have been capable of Mark III, which would have been similar to the MiG-25, of course, one of the fastest military aircraft to ever enter service. This was not produced, but one of the design studies shows that it would have been a greatly modified version of the Mark II, featuring a revised engine inlet and the extensive use of carbon steel and titanium to withstand the airframe heating. Like I said as well, there are replicas that are built. One replica built by Alan Jackson was used in the Arrow, which is a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation production series. And he, of course, began building a full-scale replica of the Arrow in 1989 and was approached by the producers of the Arrow miniseries in 1996. So, yes, there's plenty to kind of digest a little bit there. And of course, then, like I said, lots of scale models that were built as well. We can go through some of the general characteristics. But first, the destroyed, and I do that in air quotes, the destroyed plans that we mentioned before about the breakup of everything to do with the Arrow was then proven in 2020 that so apparently the plans that were thought to be destroyed and in its place in history were actually apparently kept as well, but a guy called Ken Barnes, who was a senior draftsman on the project in 1959, was ordered to destroy all documents relating to the Avro project, but instead he quietly took the blueprints home, where they remained stored for decades. The blueprints are on display in the Touch the Sky, the Story of Avro Canada exhibit at the Diefenbaker Canada Centre at the University of Saskatchewan until April 2020. In 2021, the National Research Council of Canada digitalized and released 595 Arrow reports stored in their rare book room, both located in Ottawa. So, a little bit about the general characteristics and sort of, again, the performance of the aircraft, and then we'll sort of begin to wrap this very, very short show up for this evening. So, the general characteristics of the aircraft, it would have had a two-man crew. Just there. So a general two-man crew Its length was 77 feet 9 inches long, with a 50-foot wingspan. So it wasn't a small one. It wasn't a small fighter jet at all. The empty weight of the plane was 49,000 pounds, with a maximum takeoff weight of 68,605 pounds. And of course, as we said, the two engine types for it, of course, the J75 and of course the I forget the other one now. I've mentioned it earlier and I've completely forgotten about it. You know the other one I'm on about, the Arenda engines as well. Performance-wise, maximum speed, as we mentioned, 1,307 miles an hour. And maximum speed 1.98 Mach 1.98, the cruising speed of 606 miles an hour at 36,000 feet. Its combat range was 360 nautical miles with a surface ceiling of 53,000 feet. And it could carry up to 2 air-to-air Genie missiles, unguided nuclear rockets, or up to 4 Canadair Velvet Glove or 8 AIM-4 Falcon rockets, or 3 AIM-7 Sparrow 2 to the advanced guided missiles. So, yes, there we go. It's a short show this evening because I am running this by myself. So hopefully, I mean, like I said, if you want to have a look at how the Arrow is and how it goes, etc., you can find lots of different types of articles and stories on it. And of course, there's some really good videos on YouTube that you can have a look at for a little bit more of an in-depth look to the story of the Avro Arrow. So, unfortunately, it is a short show this week. So we are gonna sort of begin to wrap the show up for this week at least. But next week we'll be back to normal. We'll be back to the regular sort of hour and a half that we're doing. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed sort of this little look into the Arrow. And hopefully I haven't bored you to death, because I'm literally, I'm the only one that's talking. Thank you, Jack, for the wonderful super chat. Fantastic show, mate. Keep going. Thank you very much. It's very difficult to do it on my own, but enjoyable at the same time. Hopefully, you guys found it enjoyable too. Next week, I'll just say very quickly. Next week, we are joined by a guy called Owen, who has a very big association with, of course, Airliners Live. We had Sam last week, and we're going to have Owen next week with us. And of course, there will be a pre-recorded podcast, which again I will not say anything about. But it should hopefully, fingers crossed, go ahead, and we should have that by the end of next week, not this week. So fingers crossed for that one. So no shout outs this week, apart from everybody that's been, everyone that's watched this evening. It's greatly appreciated. And yeah, hopefully next week you can all join us. We're back at 7:30 p.m. on the Sunday. I believe that date is on the 16th. So yeah, this weekend coming on the 16th, we'll be back with another show. Hopefully you can join us then. So for me, thank you very much for watching, of course. Again, apologies, it's been such a short show, but we'll make up for it. We'll definitely make up for it, I'm sure. But for now, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Bye.